What if I told you that everything you thought you knew about Archie Harrison, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's beloved son, was built on a foundation that might not even exist? That the smiling, chubby-cheeked boy who has been paraded before cameras, adored by millions worldwide, could be, in the eyes of the law, a phantom? It sounds impossible, even absurd. Yet, that is exactly what unfolded when the doctor who delivered Archie spoke on live television, shattering the carefully constructed reality that the Duke and Duchess of Sussex have worked tirelessly to maintain. No one in his department has any birth record of Archie. Not a scrap of paper, not a single official document. Just imagine the shock rippling through millions of viewers as these words were broadcast, unfiltered, across living rooms and smartphones around the world. Can a child really exist without an official birth record? If so, what does this mean for the royal family, the public, and, most importantly, the couple themselves? Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. The story begins, as most dramatic tales do, with appearances versus reality. To the outside world, Meghan Markle was the picture-perfect mother. Every social media post, every photograph, every staged public appearance was meticulously curated. She was the devoted, loving mom, cradling her newborn son, the modern duchess with an aura of warmth and relatability. Harry was the doting father, equally cautious and protective, the prince torn between royal obligations and new family life. Together, they projected a fairy tale image, a narrative that the media and public eagerly embraced. Every smile, every handshake, every lullaby was a carefully choreographed scene in a global stage performance. But the cracks beneath the surface were growing, invisible at first, subtle in their emergence, yet increasingly impossible to ignore. You might be wondering, how could such a glaring discrepancy, no official birth record, remain hidden for so long? The answer lies in a combination of privilege, secrecy, and perhaps a miscalculation of the public's tolerance for deception. Archival records are typically straightforward. A child is born, a certificate is issued, and bureaucracies quietly tick along. In the royal world, however, secrecy and discretion are paramount. But secrecy does not erase facts. It only hides them. And when those hidden facts emerge, especially in a public forum, the consequences can be catastrophic. The doctor's revelation was not just a bureaucratic anomaly. It was a bombshell aimed directly at the heart of the Sussex narrative. It questioned not only the authenticity of Archie's birth, but also the integrity of the couple's entire public persona. It is crucial to pause here and consider the timing. Why now? Why would a doctor, presumably sworn to confidentiality, step onto a live broadcast and make such a statement? The world has been watching the Sussexes for years, consuming interviews, documentaries, and social media updates. Every move, every smile, every carefully phrased sentence has been analyzed for meaning. But this revelation arrived like a thunderclap out of nowhere, and it demanded attention. In today's digital age, news travels instantly. Within seconds, hashtags were trending, social media erupted, and opinions flooded timelines. People were outraged, confused, and some even incredulous. Could it really be true? Was this the unraveling of one of the most publicized family stories of our generation? The immediacy and intensity of the public reaction underscored one undeniable truth. This was not just news. It was a seismic cultural event. Let's rewind slightly to understand how we arrived at this moment. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle entered the public consciousness at a time when fairy tales still had a certain allure. Their relationship promised a modern twist on the traditional monarchy, love triumphing over duty, openness replacing secrecy, diversity challenging centuries of entrenched tradition. And then Archie was born. The world waited with bated breath to see the first glimpses of this new royal family in the making. The anticipation was palpable, the media frenzy unprecedented. Every photograph was dissected, every detail examined. And yet, amidst the fanfare and the celebration, something subtle but significant was happening behind closed doors. A gap in the official narrative that would eventually grow into an undeniable void. To most of the public, Archie was more than a child. He was a symbol of hope, modernity, and even rebellion against traditional constraints. But symbols are fragile, especially when they rest on shaky foundations. And when the doctor spoke, revealing that no birth record existed in any official department, the symbolic foundation of Archie was called into question. Think about it for a moment. A royal child with no official documentation. How could the couple have allowed this? Was it a deliberate act, a misstep, or a consequence of the complex, sometimes opaque systems within the monarchy? The uncertainty creates a storm of curiosity, speculation, and, inevitably, judgment. The impact of this revelation cannot be overstated. For Harry and Meghan, it was not merely a public embarrassment. It was a challenge to their credibility, their integrity, and their carefully curated image. Imagine, for a moment, the immediate thoughts racing through their minds. Panic, denial, strategic calculations about damage control. How do you maintain authority, influence, and trust when the basic facts of your own child's existence are being questioned on global television? How do you reconcile a life lived in the limelight with a truth that, if exposed, could topple the narrative entirely? And most critically, how do you respond without making the situation worse? But the implications extend beyond personal humiliation. The monarchy itself, already under intense scrutiny, faces a new dilemma. If a royal child can exist without official records, what does this mean for the rules, the lineage, and the centuries-old traditions that govern succession, inheritance, and public perception? The monarchy has always operated on a delicate balance of tradition, symbolism, and authority. Disrupting that balance with a revelation as explosive as this doctor's statement is not a minor inconvenience. It is a structural shockwave that reverberates through every facet of royal operations, media relations, and public trust. Now, let's consider the human element. Harry and Meghan are not merely public figures. They are parents, navigating the same anxieties, fears, and challenges that millions of other families face, albeit under a level of scrutiny most cannot imagine. The revelation that their child's existence, or at least the official acknowledgement of it, is in question introduces a deeply personal layer of stress and uncertainty. How does a parent cope when the foundation of their child's legal and social identity is challenged in front of the entire world? The emotional stakes are enormous, and they intersect with the very public persona the couple has worked so hard to construct. Every decision, every statement, every private conversation now carries weight far beyond the ordinary. For the audience, this story is compelling for multiple reasons. It is not just about royalty, scandal, or celebrity. It is about truth, identity, and the fragile line between reality and perception. It is about the collision between private lives and public fascination. It is about power, secrecy, and the consequences when these elements collide in a spectacular, unavoidable way. And perhaps most importantly, it poses a question that resonates far beyond Buckingham Palace or Montecito. What happens when the truth cannot be contained, when the facts refuse to align with the carefully constructed narrative? How do individuals, institutions, and entire societies respond when the unthinkable becomes undeniable? And yet, even with all of this turmoil, the story is far from over. The doctor's revelation was only the beginning. Social media chatter, insider leaks, potential legal implications, and the global audience's relentless curiosity all set the stage for events that would escalate with breathtaking speed. The narrative is not linear. It twists, turns, and builds tension in ways that even the most seasoned observers could not predict. For every answer provided, new questions arise. For every explanation, contradictions emerge. For every public statement, the shadow of doubt grows longer. The story is alive, evolving, and dangerously unpredictable. So here's the question that lingers in the air as we begin this expose. If Archie Harrison's official existence is in question, what else might be hiding in the shadows of this royal tale? What truths are yet to emerge from behind the palace walls, from the corridors of power, from the carefully controlled public narrative? And more importantly, how will Harry and Meghan respond as the world watches, breathless and unflinching, as one of the most audacious royal revelations in recent memory unfolds? Imagine believing in a story so completely that every detail feels sacred, untouchable, untarnished. That was the world Harry and Meghan created around Archie Harrison. A picture-perfect family, radiating love and warmth, presented to the public as the modern fairy tale the monarchy never knew it needed. Social media adored them. Fans celebrated every smile, every milestone, every staged photograph. And yet, behind the cameras, behind the glossy Instagram posts and meticulously curated appearances, a story was quietly fraying at the edges. The cracks were invisible to the casual observer, but to those paying close attention, the inconsistencies were there. Tiny, almost imperceptible, yet growing with each passing day. So, how did the Sussexes convince the world that Archie existed as the child we all saw in photographs and video clips, while allegedly leaving no official trace of his birth? To understand this, we have to step back and examine the mechanics of their fairy tale. Harry and Meghan were not just participating in the monarchy, they were rewriting its narrative. Every public statement, every media appearance, every charity event was carefully plotted. They controlled what people saw, what people thought, and how people felt about them. The world saw a loving couple welcoming a beautiful child into the royal fold. But the world wasn't seeing everything. From the very beginning, Archie was treated not just as a child, but as a symbol, a living emblem of a modern, inclusive, and compassionate monarchy. The Sussexes made sure of it. Photos of Meghan cradling Archie, Harry holding him aloft, smiling for cameras as journalists jostled to capture the perfect moment. Every image was a piece of an elaborate puzzle, designed to build admiration, loyalty, and emotional investment. Every public milestone was an act of theater, and who could blame them? The royal family has always been a stage, and the Sussexes had mastered the performance. But what happens when the stage is built on a shaky foundation? It wasn't just appearances. Every detail in Archie's early life, from his first public outing to his christening, was tightly controlled. The public saw what the Sussexes wanted them to see. But when we scrutinize the timeline, inconsistencies begin to surface. The world was shown images of a newborn, yet insiders whispered about gaps, hospital visits that weren't officially recorded, staff who seemed uneasy, documents that were conspicuously missing. At first, these anomalies were dismissed. People assumed they were oversights, bureaucratic errors, or minor lapses easily explained away. But as time passed, the anomalies multiplied, like cracks spreading through a glass pane. And then came the doctor's revelation. A bombshell delivered not through a tabloid leak, not through an anonymous source, but directly on live television. "No one in my department has any birth record of baby Archie." That line, simple, precise, and utterly devastating, changed everything. Suddenly, what was once a carefully controlled narrative became a mystery, a question mark hovering over the Sussexes' entire public persona. If the very existence of Archie as a legally recognized child was in doubt, what else in the story could be questioned? Let's pause for a moment to imagine the public reaction. Millions of viewers, fans who had adored Archie since birth, suddenly confronted with the idea that the child they had celebrated might not exist in the official records. Shock, disbelief, outrage, a mixture of emotions impossible to untangle. Social media erupted, the news cycle went into overdrive, and every media outlet scrambled to cover a story they had once celebrated. The narrative that had seemed unassailable, the story of the modern royal family, was now vulnerable, exposed to scrutiny in ways Harry and Meghan could never have anticipated. But here's where it gets even more complex. The public's emotional attachment to Archie was not incidental, it was intentional. By presenting Archie as a symbol of hope, love, and modernity, the Sussexes had ensured that millions of people were invested in him, not just as a child, but as an ideal. And now, that investment was being challenged. The revelation didn't just undermine Harry and Meghan. It challenged the collective trust of the public. It made people question everything they had been told, everything they had believed, and everything they had admired. The implications of this revelation were immediate and far-reaching. For Harry and Meghan, it was a personal crisis. Their carefully constructed image of loving, devoted parents was under threat. Every smile, every interaction, every media moment now carried the weight of scrutiny. The panic behind closed doors must have been palpable. Imagine the conversations in private, frantic phone calls to lawyers, urgent consultations with PR advisors, whispered discussions about damage control. Imagine the fear, the tension, the sense that everything they had built could unravel in a matter of hours. And yet, the story doesn't stop there. To fully understand the gravity of the situation, we have to consider the broader context. The monarchy is a system built on tradition, protocol, and public trust. Every action, every decision, every record is meticulously maintained to ensure continuity and credibility. If a royal child could exist without an official record, what does that say about the system as a whole? It raises questions about accountability, transparency, and the ability of even the most public families to manipulate perception. The doctor's revelation was more than a personal blow to the Sussexes. It was a disruption of an institution centuries in the making, and the timing couldn't have been more explosive. The world is watching the Sussexes more closely than ever. Every interview, every appearance, every statement is analyzed, dissected, and debated. Audiences have become adept at reading between the lines, spotting contradictions, and questioning motives. In this climate, a revelation like the doctor's doesn't just make headlines, it goes viral. Within minutes, social media exploded with speculation, outrage, and incredulity. The narrative that had once seemed untouchable was now fractured, vulnerable, and unpredictable. So what does this mean for Harry and Meghan going forward? How do they navigate a world where the most basic fact, the existence of their own child, is in dispute? How do they maintain credibility, influence, and public support when faced with such a fundamental challenge? And perhaps most importantly, how do they respond without creating even more chaos? These questions are not hypothetical. They are immediate, pressing, and impossible to ignore. For the audience, the intrigue is irresistible. We are drawn to stories that challenge perception, expose contradictions, and reveal hidden truths. This isn't just gossip. It's a narrative about trust, identity, and the collision between public image and private reality. It's about the human stakes behind headlines: fear, shame, desperation, and the lengths people will go to protect themselves and their loved ones. And as viewers, we are compelled to follow every twist, every revelation, and every response, because each one carries consequences that ripple far beyond the walls of Montecito or Buckingham Palace. And yet, despite the shock, despite the panic, despite the global scrutiny, the story is far from over. The doctor's statement was just the beginning. Insider accounts, leaked recordings, legal consultations, and public speculation all promise a narrative that twists and turns with each passing day. The initial revelation acts as a spark, igniting a wildfire of questions and intrigue. For every answer, a new mystery emerges. For every clarification, a new contradiction appears. The story evolves, alive and unpredictable, drawing the audience deeper into a web of suspense, uncertainty, and drama. And so, as we embark on this exposé, the question remains: if the very existence of Archie Harrison is now in doubt, what other truths might be hiding in the shadows? What else are we yet to learn about the carefully orchestrated world of the Sussexes? And how far will the public, the media, and the royal institution go to uncover the reality behind the fairy tale? The answers are coming, but what comes next will change everything. It happened live. No warnings, no teasers, no advance leaks. Just a doctor, speaking directly into the camera, delivering words that would send shockwaves around the world. No one in my department has any birth record of baby Archie. Pause for a moment and let that sink in. No birth record. The child that millions of people had celebrated, cooed over, and followed through every milestone suddenly existed in a legal void. Every photograph, every public appearance, every story we believed about this little boy now faced a gnawing, uncomfortable question. If the records don't exist, then what does exist? The doctor's calm tone was the most disarming part. There was no hesitation, no whisper of doubt, no hesitation for dramatic effect. It wasn't sensationalized for tabloid headlines. It was simple, factual, and delivered in a manner that left no room for interpretation. To the casual viewer, it might have seemed almost clinical, but the implications were anything but. It wasn't just a statement about a missing document. It was a challenge to the narrative, a disruption of the carefully constructed image of the Sussex family, and a public confrontation with a truth that the world had not been prepared to face. Now, imagine the immediate reaction. Millions of viewers watching from their living rooms, offices, and phones froze. The live feed didn't cut to commercials. The doctor didn't pause for applause. The words landed with brutal clarity. Social media erupted in real time. Hashtags spiked, threads exploded, and discussions that were previously lighthearted or speculative turned urgent and panicked. People began to question everything they had seen before. Could this really be true? Could the most visible, celebrated child in modern royal history lack the most fundamental official acknowledgement of existence? And if so, what did that mean for the parents who had presented him as the epitome of their fairy tale family? The doctor didn't stop there. Beyond the simple declaration, the interview revealed subtle nuances that made the revelation even more powerful. He explained the rigorous protocols in place for documenting births, particularly for children born into high-profile families. Hospitals don't casually misplace records, especially not for a royal birth. The processes are redundant, reviewed, cross-checked. Yet, in Archie's case, there was nothing. No entry, no certificate, no confirmation. The words themselves were shocking, but the subtext, deliberate or accidental, was even more incendiary. Someone, somewhere, had broken procedure. Or worse, someone had deliberately ensured that procedure would be bypassed. For Harry and Meghan, the broadcast must have felt like a punch to the gut. Imagine watching a statement like this go public without warning. The panic, the disbelief, the fear, these emotions had to ripple through the couple immediately. Every private calculation about how to maintain control, how to manage perception, and how to maintain their carefully curated image suddenly became irrelevant. The narrative they had built so painstakingly for years was crumbling in front of their eyes, in front of the world, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. And the world noticed. The media, which had often played a role in building up the couple's image, now seized the opportunity to question, to investigate, to amplify. Analysts dissected the statement, experts speculated on its implications, and pundits debated the legality and authenticity of the claim. Every major outlet, from traditional print to online news and social media channels, ran the story. The narrative shifted in an instant. Where once Harry and Meghan were seen as the modernizing force in the monarchy, they were now cast into a narrative of secrecy, obfuscation, and unanswered questions. But the emotional weight of the revelation didn't stop at public perception. It cut deeper into the personal and familial dimensions. Harry and Meghan are, first and foremost, parents. The idea that Archie might not have an official record would naturally spark anxiety, confusion, and dread. The doctor's words weren't just a public statement. They were a challenge to their role as parents in the eyes of the law. The implications were staggering. Imagine having to explain to family, friends, and the public that your child's legal existence was, at best, unclear. Imagine the fear that legal authorities, international regulations, and even institutions designed to protect children could be suddenly in play. And yet, the broadcast carried another layer of suspense that few initially recognized. The doctor's interview wasn't sensationalized, but the implications for secrecy were massive. If no records existed, who else in the royal circle knew? How long had this anomaly been in place, and what conversations had been had behind closed doors to manage it? Could this be a simple, bureaucratic oversight, or a calculated effort to manipulate perception, media narratives, and public expectations? Every viewer suddenly became a detective, piecing together the timeline, questioning appearances, and analyzing every previous statement for discrepancies. In those moments, social media became a pressure cooker. Twitter feeds, Instagram stories, and TikTok videos exploded with theories, leaks, and clips from the interview. Some were incredulous, some were enraged, and some were horrified. Was this a misstep by the Sussexes, or a more sinister attempt at control? Fans who had defended every action, every word, every appearance now found themselves questioning everything. And as the story unfolded, the doctor's calm, measured delivery contrasted sharply with the storm it unleashed. The tension was palpable. It was a live, global drama playing out in real time. The doctor's words also had profound implications for the media ecosystem surrounding Harry and Meghan. For years, coverage had swung between adulation and criticism, often following the narrative the Sussexes themselves had curated. But this revelation disrupted that balance completely. It forced journalists, reporters, and commentators to reassess prior coverage. Were images of Archie staged or doctored? Were timelines falsified? Were public appearances orchestrated to distract from missing documentation? The questions multiplied, and answers were elusive. The narrative that once seemed predictable and controlled had exploded into a maelstrom of doubt and speculation. And yet, even amidst all this chaos, the doctor's calm and factual approach added another layer of intrigue. He didn't make accusations. He didn't speculate. He simply presented a fact that could not be ignored. No birth record. No documentation. Nothing. It was almost as if the truth itself had been stripped bare, leaving the public to grapple with its consequences. And in doing so, he inadvertently exposed a vulnerability in the very system the Sussexes had relied on to maintain control: the fragility of perception, the limits of secrecy, and the inescapable power of transparency. For Harry and Meghan, the broadcast created an immediate crisis. Every private calculation, every legal strategy, every public relations move became urgent. How do you respond to a live, unfiltered statement that challenges the foundation of your family narrative? How do you reassure the public, maintain credibility, and protect your child at the same time? The pressure was immense, and any misstep could compound the fallout exponentially. For the audience, this created a dramatic tension that was irresistible. We were witnessing the beginning of a narrative unraveling, with every second pregnant with suspense and uncertainty. And as if that weren't enough, the live nature of the broadcast meant there was no opportunity to edit, no chance to control the message after the fact. It was immediate, it was global, and it was devastating. The doctor had not just revealed a missing birth record. He had ignited a crisis that would ripple through the monarchy, the media, and the public consciousness. Every viewer was forced to ask the same question: what else might be hidden behind the carefully constructed image of the Sussexes? The doctor's words were the opening salvo, but they also set the stage for an even greater revelation. The private reaction of Harry and Meghan. How did they respond behind closed doors? What discussions were happening with lawyers, advisors, and family members? And most importantly, how would this revelation shape the unfolding story of one of the most scrutinized families in modern history? The answers were yet to come, and the suspense was unbearable. How can a royal child have no birth records? Ask yourself that. Stop and think. A child celebrated worldwide. A child whose first smiles and milestones were broadcast for millions to see. Yet, according to the doctor, there is no official documentation anywhere. No birth certificate. No hospital entry. Nothing. It sounds impossible. Absurd even. And yet, that is exactly what was confirmed during the live interview. The missing record is not a small clerical error. It is a crack in the very foundation of what the world believed about Archie Harrison. The implications are staggering. Hospitals, especially those handling high-profile births, follow strict procedures. Every birth is meticulously recorded. Redundancies exist precisely to prevent mistakes or omissions. Names, dates, weights, attending physicians, every detail is logged. And in royal births, the scrutiny is even more intense. Protocols are repeated, verified, and re-verified. Yet, in this case, the doctor stated unequivocally that no such record exists. That reality sent shockwaves not only through the public, but also through journalists, legal experts, and royal insiders alike. It wasn't just a missing paper. It was a narrative problem of epic proportions. Consider the symbolism. The world has watched, adored, and invested in Archie Harrison for years. He is the tangible representation of the Sussex fairy tale, modern, relatable, loving, and defiant of traditional royal expectations. A child whose existence bolstered Meghan and Harry's public image. And yet, that existence, at least from a bureaucratic standpoint, is unverified. What does it say about the trustworthiness of the couple, or about the system that allowed this gap to remain hidden? Questions began multiplying as soon as the broadcast ended. Could it be an administrative oversight? Was it a deliberate omission? Or could it be something far more complex, something that no one had anticipated? The truth is, no official record in a hospital department does not happen by accident, especially for a royal child. Consider historical precedents. Royal births, from Queen Elizabeth II to Prince William and Prince George, were meticulously documented. Every detail recorded, every document stored, every procedure followed. This ensures legitimacy, succession, and transparency, even in a system as secretive as the British monarchy. So why is Archie's case different? Why did a department that routinely documents the births of high-profile individuals fail? Or was deliberately prevented from doing so? Speculation runs rampant, and it's hard to separate fact from conjecture. Some suggest that the couple may have wanted to maintain absolute control over Archie's public image and thus bypass standard procedures. Others argue that the hospital may have been pressured, directly or indirectly, by outside forces. Still others whisper about legal or personal reasons that could explain why a record never formally existed. Each theory carries weight, each raises new questions. And in the absence of concrete answers, the void created by a missing birth record becomes a breeding ground for rumors, leaks, and scandals. It's essential to consider what this means from a practical standpoint. A missing birth record is not merely an inconvenience. It has real-world implications. Official documents establish a child's legal identity, citizenship, and status in society. Without a record, Archie's legal standing becomes ambiguous. Can he inherit property or titles? Can he be recognized in legal proceedings? Can he travel internationally without issues? The absence of such fundamental documentation creates complications far beyond what the public imagines when they scroll through Instagram posts of the happy family. And the mystery deepens when you examine the logistics of royal births. Typically, a child born into royalty has multiple layers of oversight. Hospital administrators, private physicians, royal aides, and legal advisors all coordinate to ensure that every detail is properly recorded and preserved. This creates a complex web of accountability that is nearly impossible to bypass without deliberate action. Yet here, that system seemingly failed or was bypassed. Who made that decision? Was it the Sussexes themselves? Was it a well-meaning advisor trying to protect privacy? Or was it a calculated move to maintain control over what the world sees? Public reaction to this revelation has been intense. Social media exploded with speculation and outrage. Journalists dissected the implications, digging into prior reports, photographs, and interviews. Every detail of Archie's early life has been scrutinized. Hospital visits, first appearances, public celebrations, and even nursery arrangements. People began asking the questions that were once unthinkable. Was Archie ever officially born in a hospital? Was he legally recognized at all? Are there documents hidden from the public, or from the very people who are supposed to ensure accountability? And then there's the question of trust. Trust is fragile, and when it's broken, the consequences can be catastrophic. The public had trusted Harry and Meghan, invested emotionally in Archie as the symbol of the Sussex fairy tale. Now, with the revelation of a missing birth record, that trust is shaken. People are forced to question not only what they know about Archie, but also what they know about the couple themselves. Was this oversight a mistake, or was it intentional? And if intentional, what does that say about the ethics and integrity of the Sussex narrative? Legal experts have begun weighing in. While it is rare for a high-profile birth to have no record, experts note that it is not impossible. Some suggest loopholes or administrative anomalies that could explain the situation. Others argue that the implications go far beyond paperwork. Legal recognition, citizenship status, succession rights, all could be affected. Every potential scenario opens a new Pandora's box, raising questions about the couple, the child, and the monarchy itself. And yet, the human dimension cannot be ignored. Harry and Meghan are not merely public figures. They are parents. Imagine their panic, confusion, and frustration as they realize that a statement made live on television exposed a gap that could never easily be explained. Every private decision, every legal consultation, every internal discussion suddenly had the world watching. The emotional stakes are enormous, and the pressure is relentless. For a family already under intense scrutiny, this revelation is nothing short of a crisis. The missing record also introduces a layer of suspense that keeps the public hooked. For every answer provided, new questions emerge. For every explanation, contradictions appear. Where were the documents supposed to be? Who was responsible for ensuring their existence? And most importantly, why were they absent? Each unanswered question fuels speculation, drives media coverage, and keeps the story alive in public consciousness. The tension is magnetic, almost impossible to resist. But the mystery doesn't end with the missing record itself. It extends into the behavior of those around the Sussexes. Hospital staff, legal advisors, palace insiders, all had roles to play. Who knew the truth, and who remained silent? Was there internal dissent, a quiet rebellion against secrecy, or attempts to cover up inconsistencies? Every layer peeled back reveals yet another layer of intrigue. Every new revelation raises stakes, heightens suspense, and draws the audience deeper into the unfolding drama. And so, as the world grapples with the reality of a royal child without an official record, the question remains, what else is hidden behind the carefully constructed fairy tale? What decisions, actions, or omissions have remained out of sight for so long, only to now resurface in this public crisis? The doctor's statement was only the beginning. The missing birth record is only the first clue. And as the next chapters reveal, the story of Archie Harrison and the Sussexes becomes far more complex, far more explosive, and far more consequential than anyone could have imagined. When news of the missing birth record went public, it wasn't just the world watching. Inside the walls of Buckingham Palace, tension surged like an electric current. Imagine the scene. King Charles III, a man accustomed to controlling narratives and managing crises with poise, confronted with a revelation that threatened not just a family member's reputation, but the credibility of the monarchy itself. A royal child, supposedly the embodiment of modernity, love, and hope, had no official documentation. And the confirmation came not through palace channels or discreet memos, but through a live broadcast watched by millions worldwide. The initial reaction, insiders say, was a mix of shock, disbelief, and immediate strategizing. Private aides and senior officials were summoned. Phones buzzed incessantly. Confidential documents were reviewed, and multiple legal advisors were consulted. Every official knew the stakes. This wasn't just a PR problem. It was a constitutional and symbolic issue. The monarchy depends on continuity, legitimacy, and public trust. Even a small crack in that foundation can send shockwaves far beyond a single family or household. But here, the crack was massive, and it threatened to unravel years of careful public management. King Charles, sources say, did not respond impulsively. He listened, he questioned, and he absorbed the enormity of what had been revealed. But the gravity of the situation was unmistakable. The doctor's words had not only challenged the public narrative, but had created a legal and ethical quagmire. If Archie's birth was not officially recorded, the implications were immediate. Questions about succession, legitimacy, citizenship, and even inheritance arose. The legal machinery behind the monarchy had protocols for everything, but this anomaly didn't fit any protocol. It was unprecedented. Meanwhile, Prince William and Princess Anne, both seasoned in navigating royal crises, reportedly reacted with a mixture of concern and skepticism. William, protective of the institution, reportedly feared the public fallout and the long-term implications for public perception. And, pragmatic and unflinching, demanded clarity. Who authorized this? She is said to have asked. Every question, every demand, every internal conversation underscored a single truth. The family was facing a problem unlike any other. What made this situation so volatile was not just the missing record, but the timing. The Sussexes had carefully cultivated their narrative for years. They presented themselves as a modern, transparent family, actively engaged with the public and media. Archie, as their son, was the linchpin of that story, a symbol of hope and a connection to a new vision of monarchy. To have that symbol called into question, publicly and irrevocably, was more than embarrassing. It was existential. The palace machinery moved quickly. Private meetings were held, emails were exchanged, and urgent consultations took place. Senior aides discussed potential damage control strategies. Legal experts outlined possible scenarios, ranging from official statements clarifying the anomaly to more drastic measures involving internal audits and investigations. The goal was clear: contain the narrative, manage the public perception, and protect the integrity of the royal family. But containment was easier said than done. The story had already spread globally. Millions had seen the live broadcast, and social media chatter was inescapable. Meanwhile, whispers began circulating within the palace corridors. Who had known about the missing record? Was it an oversight, a deliberate act, or a miscommunication? Insiders claim that tension between aides and advisors intensified as blame shifted and speculation grew. Every conversation carried weight. Every decision could either mitigate the crisis or exacerbate it. And in the age of digital media, every slip, every rumor, every leak could go viral within minutes. The stakes were not just reputational. They were immediate, global, and impossible to ignore. The emotional toll on the family cannot be overstated. For the monarchs, it wasn't merely a bureaucratic anomaly. It was a challenge to the very institution they represent. Public trust in the monarchy is fragile, built over centuries of tradition, ceremony, and careful public management. A single misstep, exposed publicly, can erode that trust faster than any scandal. And the doctor's revelation had exposed a misstep of epic proportions, placing the Sussexes, and by extension, the monarchy, under unprecedented scrutiny. Beyond the legal and reputational aspects, the human dimension added another layer of tension. Harry and Meghan, although outsiders in some respects, were still family. The palace, deeply hierarchical and bound by tradition, was now forced to navigate a delicate balance, manage the crisis without alienating or publicly condemning the couple. Private conversations reportedly oscillated between concern for the child, frustration over procedural failures, and outrage at the public exposure of such a sensitive matter. Every family member, every advisor, every official had a stake in how this crisis unfolded, and none could act without consequences. The media, of course, amplified the tension. International outlets dissected every possible implication. Social media became a crucible of speculation. Headlines ranged from the incredulous to the accusatory. Royal child without birth record? Sussex fairy tale under threat? What does this mean for the monarchy? Analysts debated legal ramifications, public trust, and the ethical dimensions of parental and institutional responsibilities. The coverage was relentless, and it ensured that the story would not fade quietly. At the same time, the palace understood that silence could be dangerous. Not responding promptly might be interpreted as complicity or negligence. Yet responding too quickly could inflame the situation further. It was a delicate dance, a high-stakes game of timing, messaging, and control. Every word, every gesture, every press briefing had to be calculated. But with social media and live news feeds, controlling the narrative was increasingly impossible. The palace faced a modern dilemma. How do you protect centuries-old tradition in an age of instant communication, viral videos, and relentless public scrutiny? Behind the closed doors of Buckingham Palace, tension built to a fever pitch. Meetings reportedly ran late into the night. Legal advisors debated options. Senior aides drafted statements, prepared contingency plans, and considered the fallout of every possible scenario. The internal stakes were as high as the public stakes. For the monarchy, this was more than a family issue. It was a crisis that could reshape public perception and trust for years to come. Every decision mattered. Every misstep could reverberate around the globe. And yet, even amidst the tension, the palace had to contend with one undeniable fact. The Sussexes were unpredictable. Harry and Meghan had repeatedly demonstrated that they were willing to challenge tradition, push boundaries, and control their narrative in unprecedented ways. No matter how meticulously the palace planned, there was always the possibility that the couple would act in ways that could either exacerbate or mitigate the crisis. Predicting their next move was nearly impossible, and the uncertainty added to the overall suspense and pressure. The stakes weren't just theoretical. They were immediate and tangible. Questions about succession, legal status, and public perception loomed large. Public confidence, always a delicate balance, could shift in an instant. Internal discord could undermine decision-making. And the global audience, already emotionally invested in Archie, was watching every development with bated breath. The doctor's revelation had not just exposed a missing record. It had exposed vulnerabilities, tensions, and uncertainties that had been simmering beneath the surface for years. And just when it seemed the palace had absorbed the shock and begun to strategize, a new complication emerged. The media began digging deeper into hospital protocols, royal procedures, and previous Sussex statements. Reporters unearthed interviews, photographs, and anecdotes that seemed contradictory or unexplained. Questions were raised about timing, appearances, and internal communications. Each new detail added complexity and suspense, ensuring that the story would not only continue but escalate in ways that no one, not even Buckingham Palace, could control. And so, as the palace wrestled with its internal response, the world watched, fascinated, horrified, and eager for the next revelation. What would Harry and Meghan do? How would the family handle this unprecedented crisis? And perhaps most importantly, what other secrets were waiting in the shadows, ready to surface? The doctor's statement had ignited a chain reaction, and the story was only beginning to unfold. Behind closed doors in Montecito, California, the tension was nothing short of palpable. The world had just witnessed a bombshell. The doctor who delivered Archie Harrison, speaking on live television, confirmed that no one in his department had any record of the child's birth. For the average person, this might sound like a bureaucratic hiccup. For Harry and Meghan, it was a full-blown crisis, a thunderclap shaking every carefully constructed aspect of their public persona and private lives. The panic set in immediately, invisible to the millions of eyes glued to their social media feeds and news outlets, but very real behind the walls of their sprawling estate. Imagine the scene. Harry pacing through the living room, phone pressed to his ear, a mix of disbelief and frustration contorting his usually composed features. Meghan, reportedly sitting at the edge of the sofa, scrolling frantically through news alerts and social media reactions, her face a mask of shock and anxiety. Every headline, every viral clip, every tweet was a reminder that the world had suddenly shifted its gaze from admiration to scrutiny. The couple had carefully curated a life in the public eye, but the revelation of a missing birth record was a crack too large to conceal. Every strategy, every PR move, every public smile now carried the weight of an unavoidable truth. The initial hours after the broadcast were a whirlwind of phone calls, private consultations, and emergency strategy meetings. Lawyers were contacted immediately. Advisors scrambled to craft statements that could somehow mitigate the fallout. The Sussexes knew that in the age of viral media, time was their enemy. Each passing second without a response allowed speculation, memes, and outrage to spread unchecked. The couple had to act, but carefully. One misstep could exacerbate the situation exponentially. Yet even as the legal and PR teams mobilized, the emotional toll on Harry and Meghan was undeniable. For Harry, there was a mix of anger, protectiveness, and panic. Protectiveness because this wasn't just about a public scandal, it was about his son. Anger because the revelation threatened to undermine years of carefully managed public perception. Panic because, for the first time in a very public way, the narrative they controlled slipped beyond their grasp. For Meghan, the reaction was equally intense. Known for her meticulous attention to detail and media acumen, she reportedly felt a sense of betrayal, frustration, and vulnerability all at once. The child she had proudly presented to the world now existed in a legal limbo, and there was little she could do to reverse the narrative. In those early hours, every private conversation became a delicate balancing act. Advisors debated whether to respond publicly, what tone to strike, and how to frame the narrative. Legal counsel discussed potential implications for citizenship, inheritance, and media accountability. The Sussexes faced the impossible task of protecting their child, managing their image, and containing a story that was already global. Every move carried risk, every pause carried risk. And yet, despite the chaos, the couple had to make decisions. Decisions that would define the trajectory of this unfolding crisis. Adding to the intensity, the couple reportedly began to analyze the media coverage with laser focus. Social media, which had been a tool for building influence, now became a battleground. Every post, every news story, every public reaction was scrutinized for potential impact. Leaks, insider commentary, and viral clips amplified the scrutiny. For Meghan, this was especially challenging. Known for her control over public image, she faced a scenario she could not edit, stage, or spin. The doctor's statement had bypassed every filter, every carefully crafted narrative, and landed as raw, unfiltered truth. Friends and confidants close to the couple reportedly began weighing in. Some advised restraint, urging a calm, measured response that acknowledged the situation without escalating it. Others recommended immediate public clarification, arguing that silence could be interpreted as guilt or negligence. The pressure was relentless. In the private bubble of their estate, the couple was trapped between the need to protect their child and the need to preserve their own reputations. The stakes could not have been higher. And yet, amidst the panic, Harry and Meghan reportedly considered more creative ways to manage the story. Internal discussions explored everything from carefully timed media appearances to selective leaks to sympathetic outlets. Every scenario was evaluated for potential benefit and risk. They were acutely aware that public perception mattered as much as legal reality. For a couple whose lives were constantly scrutinized, the difference between perception and truth could mean the difference between survival and complete public collapse. But the human dimension of the panic cannot be overstated. For Harry, there was a constant internal struggle. Balancing his duty to protect Archie, his desire to shield Meghan, and his responsibility to manage public perception. He reportedly alternated between deep frustration at the situation and moments of quiet reflection, thinking about what had led to this unprecedented scenario. Meghan, meanwhile, wrestled with anger and disbelief. How could a mistake, or intentional oversight, have placed them in such a vulnerable position? How could their most cherished possession, their child, suddenly become the center of a global controversy? The couple also reportedly began anticipating potential consequences. Could the absence of a birth record impact Archie's future legally, socially, or politically? Could it give critics ammunition to question the legitimacy of their entire narrative? Could it destabilize the delicate balance of their public image, eroding years of influence and goodwill? Every question seemed to multiply. Every potential consequence seemed more terrifying than the last. And while Harry and Meghan tried to strategize, the world continued to react. Media outlets, social platforms, and public forums exploded with analysis and speculation. Journalists dug into previous interviews, appearances, and statements, seeking inconsistencies. Fans debated, critics lambasted, and the narrative spiraled in ways the couple could not control. The sense of urgency intensified. The private panic of Harry and Meghan became a public spectacle. They were no longer just parents in a crisis. They were figures in a global drama unfolding in real time. Despite the panic and chaos, there was one thing both were acutely aware of. The story was far from over. The doctor's statement had opened a Pandora's box, and every subsequent development would escalate the situation further. The couple needed to prepare for additional revelations, leaks, and potential confrontations. The missing birth record was only the tip of the iceberg. Behind the scenes, legal teams, palace insiders, and media outlets were already gathering information, ready to probe deeper. And so, the stage was set for what would become a high-stakes game of strategy, secrecy, and survival. Harry and Meghan's private panic was not just a fleeting emotional reaction. It was the first act in a drama that would unfold publicly over the following days and weeks. Every decision mattered. Every action had consequences, and every second that passed without resolution only intensified the pressure. And then the leaks began. Just when the world thought the doctor's revelation about Archie's missing birth record was shocking enough, whispers turned into whispers with substance. Leaked conversations, private messages, and hidden communications that had never been meant for public eyes. What started as a public scandal became a labyrinth of secrets, exposing the unseen chaos behind Harry and Meghan's carefully curated image. The world was no longer reacting to a missing document. It was reacting to the possibility that the Sussexes had spent years orchestrating a story that may have only partially aligned with reality. It started subtly. Anonymous sources hinted that the couple had engaged in conversations with advisors and aides that contradicted public statements. Messages surfaced suggesting urgency, secrecy, and a meticulous effort to control every narrative about Archie. Some were minor, questions about timing, appearances, or media statements. Others were far more consequential, hinting at deliberate strategies to obscure or manipulate certain facts. The leaked communications were pieced together like fragments of a puzzle, forming a picture that was both fascinating and unsettling. Consider one example that circulated widely on social media: a series of text exchanges between Meghan and a close advisor discussing how to handle inquiries about Archie's birth. The tone was urgent, almost frantic. Questions about timing, phrasing, and potential public reactions dominated the conversation. Phrases like, We need to control the narrative, and no one can know this yet, fueled speculation that there may have been intentional efforts to keep certain details hidden. The public, already on edge after the doctor's live revelation, now had additional reasons to question everything they had been told. The leaked conversations revealed more than just strategy. They revealed emotional tension. In some messages, Meghan reportedly expressed fear and frustration. She questioned why information had surfaced prematurely, why the story had been leaked, and how the public might react. Harry, meanwhile, was portrayed in messages as attempting to manage both the legal and emotional dimensions of the crisis. He reassured staff, urged discretion, and emphasized the need to maintain control. The intensity of these exchanges painted a picture of a couple under immense pressure, juggling personal, legal, and public responsibilities in real time. But the most explosive elements of the leaks were not just texts, they were recordings. Insider audio snippets allegedly captured private discussions between the couple and their team. In one recording, an advisor reportedly warned, "If this gets out, it could spiral beyond anything we've managed before." Meghan's voice, calm yet sharp, responded, "Then we manage it before it manages us." The tension in these recordings is palpable. It's a glimpse behind the velvet curtains, where decisions are not made for show but for survival. The stakes are personal, professional, and existential all at once. The public reaction to the leaks was immediate and intense. Social media platforms buzzed with speculation, debates, and analysis. Fans were divided, some sympathetic, others skeptical, and many simply fascinated by the unfolding drama. Every leak added fuel to the fire, creating a sense of urgency and unpredictability. Journalists scoured the fragments for inconsistencies, context, and implications, amplifying the story even further. The combination of a missing birth record and private communications painted a narrative that seemed almost cinematic in its scope. Experts began weighing in. Psychologists, crisis managers, and media strategists analyzed the leaked communications to interpret the couple's emotional state, decision-making, and priorities. Legal analysts explored the potential implications. Could these messages be used in court? Do they suggest intentional misrepresentation? Are there legal consequences for failing to record a child's birth properly? Each expert perspective added depth and urgency to the unfolding story. It became clear that the situation was no longer a private embarrassment. It was a complex, multifaceted crisis with legal, emotional, and societal ramifications. Meanwhile, the palace reportedly watched closely. Senior officials, accustomed to managing public perception, recognized the danger in the leaks. Any piece of information, no matter how small, had the potential to escalate into a major scandal. Discussions behind closed doors focused on containment, how to protect the integrity of the monarchy while managing the very public unraveling of the Sussexes narrative. Legal teams prepared for potential inquiries, while communications specialists drafted messaging strategies to reassure the public without inflaming tensions further. The stakes could not have been higher. And yet, even as advisors scrambled to respond, new pieces of hidden evidence emerged. Email chains, internal notes, and third-party confirmations suggested that the missing birth record was not the only irregularity. Questions arose about hospital protocols, timelines, and the accuracy of prior public statements. Every revelation fed the media frenzy, creating a relentless cycle of speculation and reporting. For Harry and Meghan, it was a storm that showed no sign of abating. Every move was scrutinized, every communication analyzed, and every decision weighed against the possibility of further exposure. Perhaps most importantly, the leaks illuminated a truth that had been quietly simmering behind the public narrative. The gap between appearance and reality was larger than anyone had suspected. The world had been shown a carefully curated story, a loving family, a celebrated royal child, a modern fairy tale. But beneath the surface, the private conversations revealed fear, tension, and a relentless effort to control perception. The narrative that had seemed seamless now appeared fragile, almost artificial, and deeply human in its imperfection. The tension reached new heights as the leaked materials revealed potential internal conflicts. Staff members who had previously been loyal reportedly expressed frustration at the secrecy and pressure. Conversations hinted at disagreements over strategy, messaging, and how to handle inquiries. One recorded exchange allegedly included a heated debate about whether to preemptively release information to mitigate fallout or continue to manage it behind the scenes. The disagreements, though private, underscored the complexity of navigating a crisis of this magnitude. For the public, the human drama was irresistible. The mixture of secrecy, emotion, and high stakes created a story that was as compelling as it was scandalous. Every new leak added layers of tension and intrigue. Audiences were drawn deeper into the unfolding narrative, compelled by the intersection of truth, perception, and consequence. The drama was no longer abstract. It was immediate, tangible, and personal, touching not only the couple, but also millions of people who had followed Archie's story from birth. And yet, even amidst the chaos of leaked communications, one question lingered above all others. What would Harry and Meghan do next? The doctor's live statement had exposed a critical vulnerability. The leaked conversations had revealed their private panic and strategic maneuvers. But how would they respond to the mounting pressure, the relentless scrutiny, and the unyielding media storm? Every decision carried risk. Every word could ignite further controversy. Every delay could be interpreted as guilt or weakness. The stakes were unprecedented, and the tension was unbearable. As the leaks continued to surface, the suspense built to a crescendo. The public had seen only fragments of the unfolding story, yet even those fragments were enough to spark speculation, debate, and outrage. Harry and Meghan were navigating uncharted territory, facing a crisis that blurred the lines between private and public, personal and political. The doctor's revelation, combined with the leaks, created a narrative that was relentless, evolving, and impossible to ignore. And as if that weren't enough, insiders hinted that even more damaging evidence might surface, documents, recordings, or testimonies that could further complicate the situation. The narrative was far from complete. Every unanswered question, every undisclosed detail, every hidden communication held the potential to escalate the crisis even further. The story was alive, unpredictable, and dangerously compelling. The moment the doctor confirmed that no one in his department had any birth record of Archie Harrison, the legal wheels began turning. What might have seemed like a shocking revelation on live television was, in reality, the ignition of a potential legal firestorm. For the Sussexes, this was not just a public embarrassment. It was the kind of crisis that could redefine their legal standing, their public image, and their relationship with the monarchy. And while the world debated social media theories and speculated endlessly, behind the scenes, legal experts were dissecting every word, every implication, and every possible consequence. First, consider the legal significance of a missing birth record. A birth certificate is not just a bureaucratic formality. It establishes citizenship, parental rights, and legal identity. Without it, a child's official existence is in question, which could have ramifications spanning from international travel to inheritance rights. In the context of a royal child, these stakes are magnified. Royal lineage, succession rights, and the continuity of historical protocols are all dependent on verifiable records. If Archie's birth could not be confirmed in official channels, the ripple effects could be massive, and the legal implications would be immediate and unavoidable. Inside the Sussex household, panic reportedly escalated as legal advisors scrambled to analyze the fallout. Imagine the conversation. "We need to determine if this could affect citizenship," one lawyer might have said. "We need to review the chain of custody for any hospital records," another added. Every angle, every detail was considered, and no stone was left unturned. Harry and Meghan faced questions they had never anticipated, questions that went far beyond media scrutiny and into the realm of legal accountability. The complexity of the situation was staggering. In addition to the missing birth certificate, there were potential issues surrounding public statements and prior interviews. Had the couple misrepresented facts intentionally or inadvertently? Could any claims be considered misleading in a legal sense? Could they face scrutiny from authorities in the UK or the United States, given that they had lived and operated in both jurisdictions? Legal experts began mapping out worst-case scenarios, each more daunting than the last. The stakes were real, and they were immediate. Some insiders suggested that the couple had already anticipated legal complications but were unprepared for the exposure to happen on such a public stage. Previously, legal strategies might have included quietly ensuring documentation, consulting with advisors, or managing sensitive details internally. But the live broadcast removed any element of privacy or control. The public, media, and legal observers were now witnesses to a potential irregularity that had previously been shielded. The exposure had transformed what might have been a manageable administrative issue into a high-profile legal crisis. Legal analysts quickly jumped in, providing commentary and speculation for public consumption. Some suggested that the situation could trigger formal investigations into the hospital, questioning whether procedures were followed correctly. Others considered whether the royal family might intervene to clarify Archie's status, seeking to protect the integrity of succession protocols. Experts noted that if the couple were found to have misrepresented facts intentionally, the ramifications could include lawsuits, inquiries, or other legal consequences. Every public statement became evidence, every interview a potential document in a legal puzzle. Meanwhile, the palace reportedly convened its own internal review. Senior aides and legal advisors examined previous correspondence, communications, and hospital interactions. Their goal was to determine if any breach of protocol had occurred, whether any guidance had been ignored, and what steps could be taken to mitigate both legal and reputational risk. Every possible scenario was considered. Could the child be officially recognized retroactively? Could documentation be reconstructed without violating privacy or protocol? These questions were urgent, complex, and unprecedented. And yet, the human element added an even deeper layer of complexity. Harry and Meghan, despite their media experience, were suddenly thrust into legal territory that intersected with deeply personal issues. The notion that Archie's legal status could be questioned introduced stress, fear, and anxiety. The couple reportedly spent hours discussing contingency plans, what to say publicly, how to engage legal counsel, and how to